When you buy into a sequel of a game that you played and enjoyed just 2 years ago, you kind of have a certain level of expectation about what the game is going to give you and what you're going to be doing in the game. Granted, when you buy into a sequel, you're kind of expecting some sort of evolution of some sort to the gameplay that you already know and love. But how far is too far? How's it going, everyone? My name is ingeniousclown, and I've been playing a little bit of Shadow Warrior 2. And I couldn't help but notice something different about it compared to Shadow Warrior 1. And I don't mean the original one from the 90s or whenever it was. I mean the remake that came out in like 2014 or something. And I think what I'm going to call this is the Borderlandsification of Shadow Warrior. Now, I find this kind of strange. I find the direction that Shadow Warrior 2 has gone in really strange. Somewhat confusing even. Because when I think of Shadow Warrior, I think of chaotic combat, I think of clever, albeit dirty one-liners, lots of dick jokes, and a relatively linear experience. I mean, if you think about it, the game that Shadow Warrior was, both previous incarnations of it, including the 90s game, they're straightforward experiences. Sure, they're different from one another, but they're both like level-based action games, along the lines of the original Doom or even the new reboot of Doom. Where you just kind of go through, you do your thing, you kick ass, you go on your way, and you're done. That's what all these games are. That's what all of them except Shadow Warrior 2 happen to be. Now, what's different about Shadow Warrior 2 compared to Shadow Warrior 1 is that it's got this very in-depth looting system, this procedural generation of the world and the levels that you're in. It's got a more open world feel. It's got like quests and side quests. It's got the multiplayer. It feels a lot more like Borderlands than Shadow Warrior 1 did. And Shadow Warrior 1, for the record, didn't feel anything like Borderlands. It definitely felt like its own game, with its own crazy combat and its own crazy RPG mechanics. Although they were light, they were still there. Shadow Warrior 2, on the other hand, takes it up a notch. And like I said, it introduces quests, a massive inventory system. You have these merchants that you have to buy from and sell to. You have all sorts of crazy weapons to choose from that you have to manage by putting on upgrades with like the gems that you loot, the upgrades that you loot throughout the world. And these gems can just completely change the weapon or change the elemental damage of the weapon or just also, it's crazy. It's crazy. There's so much to keep track of. Now, I don't want to sit here and say that this is necessarily a bad thing. None of these systems on their own are bad. But they're the kind of systems that you kind of have to be in the mood for. If you take the most recent Doom game and you take the most recent Borderlands game, you might enjoy both of them, but you might not enjoy both of them at the same time. Borderlands is like, it's got this more in-depth RPG system going for it, while Doom is a straightforward, action-oriented, batshit insane experience. I mean, I guess they're both kind of batshit insane, but you know what I mean. Even though they're both first-person shooters, that can be pretty action-oriented, you can't deny that they feel completely different. And if you're gonna buy a sequel to Borderlands, you're expecting a similar experience to what Borderlands is. If you buy a sequel for Doom, assuming that comes out in a couple years, I hope it does because this remake of Doom was awesome, you're going to expect a similar experience. But what will you think of this hypothetical sequel of Doom if it comes out and it has this crazy loot system? If it has this money system where you need to buy stuff from merchants, you have to manage your bags with all of your inventory, you have to upgrade your weapons very specifically, you have to go visit merchants to sell your stuff, you have to break up the flow of combat, the flow of your action, to make sure that you're managing things properly. How would you feel? I'd feel a little annoyed by it, and that's kind of how I feel about Shadow Warrior 2. Shadow Warrior 2 is not a bad game. In fact, the combat is a lot more fun in this one than it was in the first one. And the first one had absolutely insanely fun combat. It was incredible. That's one of the things I loved most about it, is that the combat, no matter how many times you went into it, it always felt fresh and fun and exciting. And so far, this one seems to take that up a notch. So yeah, I'm definitely enjoying Shadow Warrior 2, but I can't say that I like or appreciate or was even expecting all of these in-depth RPG mechanics that you find in Borderlands. In fact, it feels way more like Borderlands than it feels like the original Shadow Warrior in many ways. It just doesn't even feel like the same franchise outside of the dick jokes, the main character, and perhaps the general aesthetic of demons and Asian architecture. But also, I can't really help but wonder if the combat being better is a direct result of the loot system being there. Because now you have more freedom with your weapons. You have the freedom to put charging on your shotgun, so you can charge up an extra powerful shot to devastate whole swaths of enemies. That's not something that you would have had the option to have in Shadow Warrior 1, for example. But at the same time, what if they could have just kind of put it in there as like side grades for a weapon with the original kind of upgrade system that Shadow Warrior 1 had, which was more straightforward. You did it all in a pause menu. And then maybe you'd be allowed to switch modes on a gun or something. I don't know. That would still be much less free than what you have with this crazy, gigantic loot system with procedurally generated loot and upgrades with all sorts of weapon-changing mechanics. It's hard to say. And because of that, I'm really torn. Like, I really hate inventory management at this point in my life. I just kind of find myself annoyed and frustrated by it because it's breaking up the flow of what would otherwise be a very exciting and very fast experience, a very fast action-oriented experience, which is really all I wanted from Shadow Warrior 2. I guess I just wanted more of the same. And like I said at the beginning of the video, you kind of expect a sequel to evolve on the mechanics that you know and love from the previous game. But I want to ask a question. How far is too far? For those of you that have played Shadow Warrior and Shadow Warrior 2, what do you think? I'd like to know what you think about the game and what you think about the whole Borderlandsification of Shadow Warrior. How far is too far when evolving a franchise? How would you feel if Doom, for example, did this kind of thing? And like I keep saying, I myself am torn, but at the end of the day, I think Shadow Warrior 2 has gone a little too far. But luckily, the action and the combat is just, it's so addicting that I can't stop, so I'm kind of trudging through the inventory management in spite of myself. But anyway, please let me know what you think about all this in the comments section below. I'd like to see some discussion about this. Has it gone too far? Will other things be going too far? Are you afraid of other things going too far? I don't know, let's talk about it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts and opinions. And if you like this video, please be sure to hit that like button. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, I did do a stream of this game, and I'm planning on finishing it on stream eventually. And if you're interested in watching the archived videos from my streams, you can click on an annotation or a card or check the description below to be taken to my gameplay channel where I am posting the archives of my streams if you miss any of them. And finally, if you haven't already, be sure to follow me on Twitter at ingeniousclown and hit that subscribe button to be notified of more awesome videos here in the future, and I will see you next time.